Going up to our ARPA Oversight Committee meeting. It's 10:30, and I think we'll kick this off. I think we'll have more people come in as we need to. Today, we've got, this has been a long road, and we ain't done yet. So you'll know the last report, I won't say the last, but we do annual reports on these, and they're due on July 31st of each year. So we've done the report July 31st of 2024. We've got to do one in 25, and we've got to do one in 26. And that's the ones that we know about. We do reports every month simply to keep track of everything, and at least quarterly also to double check things. But the annual reports turned into the federal government, and that's online. That's in a report that we've got here some too. With that, on what we've been given, and we can make this available to anyone who wants them, we received a written report from the Department of Finance. It's only about a page and a half. One of the key factors, two key factors I'll make note of, is it looks like we're all on target to meet the obligations that we have under the guidelines as far as the time frames that are required there, as far as the obligations that's required. Further, on the second page, I'll read this part of this sentence. The anticipation of awardees unable to cure their shortfalls, the Department of Finance expects to propose a modest reallocation of those funds, likely not to exceed $400,000. Now, that's an estimate right now. We're working on seeing who can and cannot cure those shortfalls, trying to get every opportunity for awardees to use this monies. But the key is that this money will be spent at the appropriate time for appropriate matters. So we're watching that. That's the purpose of this. Any comments or questions on that? None? All right. Next, I'll call attention to the evaluation of the satellite broadband technology. If y'all will recall, in our last meeting that we had, there was a discussion dealing with basically whether it should be fiber optic or go with satellite, and the argument whether one is better or not, or that. So what we've been given is a report, and this is available. We'll make that available to anyone that wants it. It's a kind of a comparison between those two, as I understand it, dealing with the satellite and with the fiber in-ground methodology. First rule of thumb, correct me if I'm incorrect here, okay, but the satellite does not fall within the regulations of the ARPA criteria. Therefore, we can only use ARPA for the fiber and conduit system. However, we are dealing with what and how does the satellite come in, and the report deals with some of those. Kind of interesting reading, but with that, anyone has any comments? Senator Elliott.
I have a few, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that very much. You know, I don't know who produced this report, but it didn't take me long to flip to the second page and see inaccurate statements. I mean, on not the cover page, but the very next page about cost per household. And I'm not going to belabor the point except for to speak generally about this. We are spending a ton of money, and a lot of it's federal money and good. And there's been a whole lot of talk about the durability of fiber over time, and it's not wrong. But I am perplexed by the hostility to a perfectly reasonable solution that is available today for Alabamians. And so all I will say, Mr. Chairman, on that note is nobody's trying to, to say fiber's bad. I think that the ADECA director called it the holy grail of broadband connectivity. And while that may be true, there are people in Alabama who would settle for a red Solo cup because they're dying of thirst and don't want to wait on the holy grail, if you will. And so I'll simply just use this forum to say there is a solution available to Alabamians that will provide broadband service to them right now for $300 a rooftop. Not 500, not 1,500. And it's easy. And so while we wait on the government internet to get there, if you're an Alabamian, you've got school-age children that may graduate before the government internet gets to you, there's a $300 solution, and it works just fine. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable solution. And hey, when, maybe you get your government internet, that's great, and you should sign up for it then. But in the meantime, for less than the price of your cell phone, you can have the broadband coverage that the free market provides that will be perfectly suitable to run your entire house, keep your teenagers entertained, and let you do your Zoom calls and everything else you need. And so I'm not going to argue the merits, because I don't know that I'm arguing with people that are being necessarily honest about some of this. But I'll just say this. There's a solution. Go get it if you want it, and maybe the government internet will get there eventually. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Chairman, you have any comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, we have a comment?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yes, this is Senator Singleton. I just want to piggyback on that, and I would love to get a copy of that report. And I am a proponent of both. I think that there's room in the state of Alabama for both. I think that there are rural areas in the state of Alabama that are so sparsely rural that we would never, ever be able to afford fiber to the home at the cost that it would cost, to get it there. And when satellite could be so much, or wireless connectivity could be so much less. And I think that there's some room for the both. I think that, I serve on the ARPA board, on this ARPA board. I also serve on the broadband board. And I've mentioned this on the broadband board, and I'll say this publicly, that I think that there is total opportunity for both to exist in the state of Alabama and for the people of the state of Alabama to get the service that needed. Thank you, sir.
Chairman Reynolds.
Mr. Chairman, I really wasn't going to say anything, but I think I will. So I agree with both my colleagues that just spoke, that it is available to the residents. But what we're dealing with here today is ARPA funds, one-time monies. And we are putting hardened infrastructure in the ground that will be there for a lifetime. And I think we're going in the right direction. So just want to make that comment, sir.
Thank you. I will also suggest that our purpose here is not to argue these two things. Both of them are available, and the infrastructure is becoming available more because of the ARPA funds. And since that's the only things that we're dealing with today, that's what we're looking at accomplishing and making headway according to the reports that we're getting. Frankly, from my aspect, I'm seeing improvements in the services I'm getting in rural Alabama. And so I hope we continue on with this. But in any case, I agree with all the colleagues. We have them available. How we're going to get to them, right now we got to deal with the federal money and how we get those dispersed. Any other questions or comments? All right. Then we'll move forward. The other report that we have is here in person. Mr. LaFleur, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you, each of you gentlemen who's here today and those who are remotely attending this Oversight Committee. Let me make sure I have the clicker here. Okay, this is a status report. It's very similar to the ones that we've provided in the past. You can see that we have it broken down into ARPA 1 and ARPA 2. ARPA 1, as you may recall, was $225 million, with $220 million going through ADEM for projects, and then the remaining $5 million to demonstration projects in the Black Belt. The ARPA 2 program has $395 million that was appropriated through ADEM to provide water and sewer projects. We have a grand total, I want to point out to you where we have under ARPA 1, 168 agreements, and under ARPA 2, 330 agreements. Previously, we had labeled these as projects. Since the time we spoke last, several of those projects have been combined into a single agreement. So agreements is a more appropriate terminology to use. The reason for that is, obviously, if there are two projects that are linked together, one agreement will suffice for them. We also have a few that have not been able to operate within the timelines for ARPA, so we have moved them to another funding source, the bipartisan infrastructure law that ADEM also administers. If you'll look here, we have 168 agreements in the ARPA 1 group and 330 agreements in the ARPA 2 group. Those were broken out into different categories. Of the $615 million that was allocated through ADEM, we have committed all of those funds, both ARPA 1 and ARPA 2. In the course of those commitments, we have worked with various recipients of those grant funds and loan funds to provide match to the degree that they are able to provide match. And if you add those two up, $183 million worth of match under ARPA 1 and $480 million worth of match under ARPA 2, that will give you $663 million of match to go with the $615 million of ARPA funds for a grand total of $1,278 million. About 52% of that is in the form of match.
Just a second.
Yes, sir.
I want you, sometimes these numbers escape us as we go through. Give me the total amount of money between the ARPA and the match money. That's additional federal money that's been brought in, right?
Those are funds that have come from the individual water and sewer systems.
That's local participation.
Correct.
I'm glad you clarified that. And between the local participation and the federal money, that was what?
$1.278 billion.
Billion dollars.
Yes, sir.
Of infrastructure.
Correct.
That's ongoing at this point in the state of Alabama.
That's correct. From ARPA, related to ARPA funding.
Correct.
There are other federal monies that we.
This is over and above what is normally done through your agency on a normal basis, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Right. Just wanted to make sure we understood the degree and the of infrastructure that we made forward with this. All right.
Yes, so we expect grand total of all of our funding that's going to be available through the timeline that bipartisan infrastructure law is available to be about $1.7 billion. And we have projects that have been requested from water and sewer systems around the state totaling about $3.4 billion. So we'll be able to satisfy about 1/2 of the funding requests that are out there for water and sewer systems.
That's using combined federal, state, and local funds, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
Okay. Moving on, we have, I want to give you the status report on the number of agreements that have been executed thus far. We have agreements out of the 498 that I mentioned earlier. 483 have been finalized, and they amount to an encumbered amount of $573 million of agreements. That constitutes about 93% of the $615 million of ARPA funding that's available. Actual expenditures today, this is money out the door, is about 12%, the $74 million roughly. These numbers are a few days old, so there's a little bit of additional funding and signature on agreements that has been that has occurred in the last few days. The number of agreements that have at least one payment request is 188. So 188 of them are already drawing their funds down of the total of the 498. That's about 38% of the total have already begun drawing funds. The agreements that are awaiting signature, there are 15 of those. Actually, there's a few less than that by some that have come in. And the reason that these 15 are still outstanding is that several of them need to acquire their matching funds to bring the project to a total funding level. There's also one in the northern part of the state where that system serves both Alabama and Tennessee customers. So we're working with Tennessee to, they're not quite as nimble as we would like for them to be on getting their funding and billing straight, but we believe all that can get done in a timely fashion.
If I could stop you right there, I was going to wait till you finish, but now that you brought that up related to Tennessee, I do want to applaud you and your department, as well as the small cities and counties that came through, stuck with the projects, and now we're beginning to finalize and really getting construction done on these projects. Because I remember back, I think our first ARPA meeting upstairs on the 6th floor, and there was an issue, and we kind of challenged you and your organization at that time, hey, let's help these cities be successful. And you've done absolutely that and that. And I think we're coming up Wednesday week, I think, to kind of kick that project off. So we really appreciate you hanging with that.
Well, thank you, sir. We have had very good cooperation for the vast majority of these projects, good cooperation with the local folks. They see their needs are going to be able to be addressed, and we fully depend on them to be good partners in this, and they've done that.
Great.
Especially in your area, as you mentioned, we'll be dedicated.
Representative Witt is in Thailand today, but he would expect me to say that to you. So
okay, well, thank you very much for passing that along. The another reason,
Mr. Director, before you move on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Real quick, I will echo what the chairman said. Your team putting $1.7 billion on the ground in short order is nothing short of amazing. I mean, it is. And I'll tell you, I was a skeptic. I was.
That's a euphemistic term.
Well, you know, but you've turned me into a believer, and you and your team have done a very, very impressive job with this. I'm impressed. And that some people in this room would tell you that's hard to do. I would ask a question about the 15 that are awaiting signature. Are we not past our internal deadline for those to be returned? And listen, I believe in setting a deadline and internal deadline, and if you need to fudge on it just a little bit, but are we past our internal deadline on that?
When we last met, we had 40 that we did not have executed contracts back from executed agreements. And we have dropped that number down now to 15. Actually, it's 12. I signed 3 more today. But the first deadline in ARPA is for a commitment of the funds, and the funds have been committed. We have if you will, handshake agreements on all of these, and the documentation is what follows. Some of these, they have to go to a board meeting before they can approve the signing of an agreement, that sort of thing. But we expect that there will be 0 agreements awaiting signature within the next 30 days.
Okay. To those systems, and this isn't necessarily a comment for you, but to those systems who still have not executed their agreement, or to those that are not moving ahead with all due haste to expend this money by the 26th deadline, there are twice as many applications for this funding as there is funding.
Absolutely, sir.
As we get closer to the 26th deadline, we're going to start pushing harder to make sure that it gets to places where it can be expended in time. So if you're lollygagging, quit it and get this man your paperwork, and let's get to getting.
Okay, I'll have a little bit about that in one of these later slides, but.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I tip my hat to the folks. It's unusual sometimes when state workers are willing to work nights and weekends to get work done, and I would be remiss in not pointing out that's exactly what our folks have been doing for some time now. So the process, it is a dynamic process. So there will be minor adjustments that will continue to occur throughout this, things such as when we get final engineering, the preliminary engineering reports may be adjusted. We'll have to wait and see how some of the supply chain issues play out over time. With 498 projects, I draw the analogy sometimes to a home builder who's got 498 homes going. Some of them are going to need special attention from time to time, and we have made provisions to try to address that. So, moving on.
That's a very good analogy for a home builder, so.
If you had 498 going, would you expect any problems? Talking about deadlines, the December 31, 24 deadline for the dollars to be obligated, that deadline has been met. The construction completion deadline for December 31, 2026 is still in play. And to address your earlier point, on June 1 of 2026, that is 6 months, a little over 6 months before the deadline, we will require each project to demonstrate the ability to complete the construction within the statutory requirement. Now, we have people waiting in the wings. I mentioned that we had $3.4 billion worth of projects and about $1.7 billion worth of funding. We ranked each one of these projects on a needs basis, both financial need and the physical plant need. And we ranked them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We have entered into agreements with all of the 1s, the 2s, and half of the 3s. If any of the ones that have been agreed upon are unable to complete that can move the funds quickly into projects that are available shovel ready, if you will. We will be monitoring the construction progress. This is normal course of business for us. We have been making state revolving fund loans for the last 30 years, and we track progress on all of those projects. We don't have the deadlines in it that we do under the ARPA funding, but we do have the process in place, and we are adjusting to make sure that we do meet the deadlines.
Mr. LaFleur, may I interrupt for just a moment? On this, you got December 31st, 2026, construction complete. Now, if I might, correct me if I'm incorrect here, okay? But December 31, 2026 is the day that the funds will have to be gone out of the bank.
Correct.
So if they complete it on December 30th, but we can't write the check until January 3rd, that money's gone.
I'll have to defer to somebody else as far as what the mechanics of what the Treasury will allow.
My point is unless that money is out of our bank, it's subject to retrieval. Now, is that accurate, Kirk?
We don't really know how the end of the thing's gonna play out. We're 2 years out, so, yeah, I mean, that's possible.
Okay.
The way some of these other federal programs are working, if you don't spend it, they
Exactly. So I don't want there to be an item, because when you get to December, not only weather but holidays get in the way, and I don't want money sitting there, even if the check is written and printed but not mailed. I may be doing an overkill, but when you're looking at monies, especially at the end, I don't want to be tripped up by that. Am I making any sense here?
Your point's well taken.
You're making a lot of sense. That June deadline needs to be pretty hard so that you can reallocate those funds.
Absolutely.
Now, the other concern about the June deadline, I think that's a great thing, but let's assume that we get to that June deadline and we have to reallocate. The question, and you talk about what waiting in the wings is that a matter that these folks in the wings are already prepared? Are they going to be having this 5.5 months, I'll say it that way, to finish up what they need to do and to get the construction done? Is that going to give you enough time to handle that?
Well, we have some contingency plans, several contingency plans on that. One is, in a typical program, you have the match dollars as the first dollars out the door. If necessary, we can make the ARPA funds the first dollars out the door. We can also provide the funding to the individual projects for them to make those payments at the time that their billings or whatever occur. Plus, we have other federal funded projects that are going to be spending approximately another $500 million that we can allocate ARPA funds to replace those bipartisan infrastructure law funds that they would have been spending, because bipartisan infrastructure law has a much more lenient deadline. We can, it's a mix and match, if you will, but we will know well ahead of time if there are any potential or foreseeable hiccups in the process, and if some unforeseeable ones come up, we have plans to adjust as necessary for that.
So the concerns have been considered, and that you have methods to ensure that doesn't get caught.
We have several escape hatches, if you will.
Good enough. That's all I need. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. If a project has not or had not completed their bid process as of August the 1st, then we are requiring monthly progress reports that began in August for them to determine what the timeline will be for their construction projects. Now, 238 projects have not completed their bid process yet. We've moved, if you will, from the initial process of submitting proposals, analyzing those proposals, negotiating agreements, entering into agreements, and then we're now moving into the execution phase. The bid process, 260 of the projects have already completed their bids for their project. They've gone out and received their bids for it. 238 remain that they're somewhere in that process. They may be developing their bid documents or final engineering, those kinds of things. But we will look, this is our first checkpoint. This is our first checkpoint. When the bids come in, the construction schedule has to meet the requirements of the ARPA program. If the construction schedule does not meet that deadline, we will move it to a different form of funding and replace it with a different project that can meet those deadlines. Once again, if the ARPA funds are spent and the project has not yet been completed, but the remaining match money will complete the project, then that would be an acceptable approach.
May I interrupt again?
Please.
You bring up a very good point, Director, and I guess I would ask anecdotally, and we may not be to this point, so forgive me, but are you seeing bids and timelines, construction timelines that exceed the December 26th deadline? Do you feel like there are going to be a fair number of those?
We haven't seen that the deadlines in the agreements. They're agreeing that they have to complete it by those dates. So we haven't seen much of that. We have seen the effects of inflation on some of the bids, where the initial estimate has been exceeded when the actual bids come in. And we have a provision for that any excess cost of the project will be adjusted through BIL funding as opposed to ARPA funding, because all of the ARPA funds have been committed, whereas we still have two tranches left in the BIL funding program. That will be our reserve for inflationary cost increases.
You have in your report that there'll be monthly progress reports beginning in August, and I think that's very wise. And just like inflation, my construction management and project management experience tells me those timelines change too. They're very fluid, and I think you'll start to see some of those slide as we go. And so I think you're doing it, but I would encourage y'all to continue to watch how much those deadlines and the construction schedule changes over time, because it's going to get longer, I would imagine.
We expect problems, and we have taken efforts to identify those problems early and then have a backup plan in place to adjust them. But fluid is a good term to use with a lot of these types of projects.
But now, if I might just to comment on that, just to make sure that I'm clear, our purpose here on the ARPA is to make sure that the money is expended and that we spend every single dime that's there, correct? That we don't send any more back to the feds. Whether the construction is actually complete or not, that will be determined on what's held in local and state funds or other funds other than ARPA monies. And from your previous answer, we can use ARPA monies to pay for up through invoice at a certain point, but the construction, if there's a glitch, if there's a sticky point or something, you can go beyond that time frame on the construction end and use other monies to finish the project. Is that accurate?
That's our plan, yes, sir.
Okay.
And if there's anybody who's tight with the dollar, it's ADEM. We have no thought that not a single penny will go back to the Treasury. We are in lockstep with you on that.
Thank you.
Okay. The monthly reports, this is something that we do. We monitor them against their construction schedule, through their pay requests, and we do on-site inspections, and we require monthly reporting, and as needed, we can up the time between reports to address problem issues as they arrive. So with that, I'll answer any questions you haven't had an opportunity to ask.
Thank you. Very good report. I appreciate your thoroughness. Comments, questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just real quick. So with 238 remaining out there for the bid process, are we seeing adequate bidders for these projects? I'm sure these are spread out all over Alabama too, right?
Well, the individual systems go through the state required bid process when they're doing it. And I don't know that I've been aware of a lack of bidders on these projects. Perhaps some of my folks, are you aware of any? No, we're in good shape. Yeah, we seem to be having a good number of bidders on the projects.
Great, thank you.
Now, sometimes bidders will bid more than what they can swallow, but that's a normal kind of a problem to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions?
Comments?
Just again, I feel good about where we are. I feel like y'all have got a good plan, lots of checks and balances, and accountability steps and measures, and I feel good. It will continue to be something that has to be monitored very closely and tightly to make sure we don't end up losing any of this money or have any overruns. But Director, I feel like you and your team again have got really good procedures in place to make sure this all gets spent and on the ground in the timeline. And
well, thank you, sir. We want to be as realistic as we can and expect problems, even if we can't see them at the moment. Okay?
If I might take a moment, and thank you, Mr. LaFleur. I don't have any more questions for you on that regard, but what I would like to do is just give a little bit of summation on things. We'll have other meetings on this, of course, but this system is winding down, and I think this is a good time to point out a couple of things. Number one, I think Alabama's done its job. I think Alabama has done the proper appointments. We've done this, first off, without hiring anybody else. And I don't mean just an outside consultant. We didn't do that either. But we didn't hire additional staff to handle this. Alabama took this monies in, we did the appropriation, we handled it all with the existing current staff that we have, and we handled it correctly. There's been glitches. Everyone knows that when you're dealing with this amount of money and throughout the state, there's going to be difficulties and such. The staff handled all of that. We're grateful for them. We acknowledge those efforts. We acknowledge that there was overtime. I don't know if it was paid or not, but there was a.
Answer is no.
I recognize that there were efforts all the time going on. I called one of the staff this morning on the way. It was her day off. She was on vacation, and she took the phone call and answered the questions. I commend not just you, Mr. LaFleur, but all the state that has been involved with this, that's handled it in the way that they have. And the result has been, we don't have any stain on anything on this. We've handled it correctly. The second is, when we look at how much good we've done for the state of Alabama, how much infrastructure we put in the ground, and we can argue about the DECA and satellite and everything else, but the truth of the matter is we are getting new infrastructure in this state that would not have been if we had not pushed this forward and done it in a correct way. The same is true with the water and sewer and all the other things that we put in monies for. And we have done this in a way that benefits the state of Alabama. We have construction going on in the state that's creating jobs, that's creating opportunities, that's improving the life of Alabama. And frankly, I think we, the state of Alabama, needs to be proud of what we've done. Thank you for your efforts. Thank the body for all that. Any other comments we have? All right.
I might pick up on one of your comments, and I mentioned this previously. One of the representatives came to me and related the story of a mayor who, when the funds became available for the upgrade to the water and sewer system, was moved to tears and was actually that emotional about having the work being done on something that was so desperately needed in her community. So, yes. Yes,
that's great.
It's been very good for the state.
Not that she was
Very good.
emotionally moved necessarily, but the point is that we've been able to do this. For your good efforts, $1.7 billion, more than $1.7 billion in the ground. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you all, and we stand adjourned.
Thank you.